Hey YouTube, this video is going to be about how I decided to endorse and support Elizabeth Warren in 2020 when I supported Bernie Sanders in 2016. And that's outside of the fact that Sanders supporters are, at least online, pretty terrible people, and he likes to disappear anything, any of the concerns of marginalized communities as identity politics and all of that. But generally speaking, from a logistical perspective, people say, why would you choose somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who is, on economic issues, perhaps a watered down version of Bernie? Pick Bernie. I think it boils down to there was a question asked in the previous debate, and I think it was a crappy question. It was a gotcha question that I didn't like. But it actually it illustrates the difference between the two in a way that I think sums up why Elizabeth Warren would make a better president than Bernie Sanders. And the question was asked of Elizabeth Warren, um, you voted for the USMCA, Bernie Sanders didn't. Why is he wrong? Well, here's the thing, he's not wrong. And she's not wrong. She voted for it, she's not wrong. He voted against it, he's not wrong. Why? How can that be? Because the USMCA isn't good enough, not by a long shot. But here's the thing, it's better than NAFTA. NAFTA, it's an improvement on NAFTA. So replacing NAFTA with the USMCA is the right decision, but it's not good enough. And I understand not wanting to endorse the USMCA because it still is going to end up moving jobs to Mexico that are currently American jobs. So I understand not wanting to vote for it. And I think it's important that there are people who didn't vote for it. I think it's important. Look, Bernie Sanders probably has the best voting record of anyone in the Senate. Like, when he finally dies, he can look at his voting record and be incredibly proud of it. But here's the thing, like, voting records don't mean that much in the long arc of history. It doesn't mean anything. It's what you got done. You stood there as a senator and said, this isn't good enough. And that's important. But as a president, you say this isn't good enough, guess what? Nothing happens. The USMCA fails. We are stuck with NAFTA. You might, counter with a, trade program that no one endorses, and nothing happens. Bernie Sanders is a good senator. I think he'd be a bad president because, simply put, he's incapable of compromise. This is not an endorsement of people who overcompromise, like someone like Amy Klobuchar, who, wants to compromise basically everything to start. Like, I have this really, really, really watered down, sort of barely recognizable as progressive platform that I'm going to give, push across the table to my Republican counterparts and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And they're going to be like, it's socialist madness. And it's not, but that's how they're going to approach any proposal by any Democrat. It's funny that Pete Buttigieg is the one that says that, they're going to say that anything we say is socialist, so why don't we just endorse the policies we believe in? That's a good point. Watered down nonsense like what Amy Klobuchar and Pete himself are endorsing is not enough because they're going to have to compromise from that point. That's going to be perceived as their extreme end, and it's not. Elizabeth Warren's not going to be able to get all of her plans through 100%, but they are really good starting points. And she's a good negotiator, and she's going to be able to find cracks that she can get her policies through. Not to the extent that they're listed currently on her site, but she's going to get stuff done. Bernie Sanders can't. He can't. He's going to approach Republicans with the list of things that he wants, and they're going to be like, no, this is, never going to happen, not in a million years. Like, here's our counteroffer. He's going to be like, that's paltry. They might be able to get to a point where it's sort of like in the middle. He's like, I can't go that far to the right. And they're going to be like, why not? And he's going to be like, well, my supporters are never going to go for that. Well, make your supporters go for it, they'll say. Like, you're their leader. Tell them this is what you could get. He has a choice at that moment to tell them this is what they can get, in which case they're going to think that he betrayed them and that he's, sold out and he's not who we thought he was, or he refuses to compromise and nothing gets done. Elizabeth Warren, on the other hand, people already think that she's going to, sellout or whatever. So seeing as that they already think that's what's going to happen, she can actually use those people to not go too far. To be, when Republicans say, "Hey, you need to come all this way," she's like, "I can't. Look at all these Bernie stands. They're never going to let me go that far." Well, they'd be like, "Well, tell them that they have to put up with it." She'd be like, "You tell them. They only listen to Bernie. I don't know what to tell you. I need to be able to count them in the next election, and I can't move the needle with those people." It would actually be beneficial for her to have Sanders in the Senate pushing her to the left so that her plans don't go too far right when she's making compromises. Too far right is basically where, Amy Klobuchar and, Pete Buttigieg start, and Biden too, for that matter. But the more I've become more convinced that Biden's not winning the nomination. Like, if it's going to be a centrist, it's either going to be Pete or, at this point, frickin' Bloomberg. And honestly, if it was between Bloomberg and Biden and Pete, I would choose Biden, but that's not what's going to happen. She's the best candidate because she can both, keep the conversation progressive, keep the movement going while making the concessions she has to make to get things through. That Bernie Sanders is a concession she simply cannot make without being considered a sellout. She's already considered a sellout, so she doesn't have to worry about that. And if you pick somebody else, someone even further to the right, then they will make concessions that'll to the point where you're like, is this really progressive legislation at all anymore? It'll be unrecognizable from the sort of things that progressive vantage point might want to put forth. So, yeah, I mean, to me, that's why. Like, you look at, Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, right? He was the most abolitionist of all, right? No, he wasn't. Obviously, the people on the front lines, Harriet Tubman was a bigger abolitionist than he was. Frederick Douglass was a bigger abolitionist than he was. But even even amongst white politicians in the Senate, in the Congress, he wasn't. If you're talking about someone like Wallace Stevens or Charles Sumner, those guys were further in the abolitionist camp, but they didn't run for president because they wouldn't have won. And even if they had, you're asking those guys to make concessions they wouldn't have been able to make. Abraham Lincoln was like, I want to end slavery, but I want to keep the Union together. So, he might make some concessions towards allowing slavery-ish, which isn't great by today's metric. But he was elected because he wasn't considered too far, too extreme. And then, of course, we had the, the Civil War anyway. So, but at the same time, someone like Stevens or Sumner would not have been able to get it done. And that's the problem with Sanders. He's too much of an ideological zealot. And it's his ideological zealotry is, pretty close to my own. But it doesn't change the fact that that's not somebody you want in the president's chair. That's great in the Senate. When it isn't good enough, he can vote against it. And people can look at that record and be like, he can be our true north on economic issues. He's not true north on any sort of social issues at all. Totally willing to, sell the farm on abortion rights and the rights of transgender people and whatever in order to get elected in this case. But at least on economic issues, he is true north. And as MLK said, the long arc of history, arcs towards justice. And I think that bends towards justice, and I think that's a true thing. And he is out there where we want to go, but not where we can be right now, not where we can get done. And down in the swamp, it's messy, and that sort of idealism works as a starting point, as an ideology, something to look for, like a North Star, but not what you're going to get done. And you're never going to get there if you move so incrementally that you're barely moving the needle, like with centrists that I've seen in this election. Elizabeth Warren can sort of bridge that divide between the two camps. She can get at least as much as, Buttigieg and Klobuchar want now, that their endpoint would be, their starting point would be something that she could get as an endpoint easily. But they're not going to get their starting point as an endpoint because Republicans are going to make concessions beyond that. Like, you were only elected because you were so milquetoast, and it's not milquetoast enough to get anything passed. So you're gonna have to make even more concessions. And by the end of the day, you're gonna be like, I don't recognize this as being even remotely useful. That's why she's the best choice. She can, she can get the job done in the right way without having to sell herself out, because the people who think that she's a sellout would think that she's a sellout, already think she's a sellout, right? But she's far enough left that the compromise position will be someplace that makes America a better place, as opposed to the centrists, where the compromise position will be someplace that doesn't do anything useful. And that's my pragmatic reason for supporting her. Like, I think that she can get a bill passed that moves the needle enough to make a difference in people's lives. Bernie Sanders either has to betray his movement, which will cause it to crumble, or he won't get anything done because he will refuse to compromise. And the centrists are already too compromised to get anything meaningful passed. That's why she's the best candidate. Besides the fact that she's brilliant, she has these detailed plans. She has ideas that are approachable by regular people that don't follow politics that much, and they can understand how that could help their lives in a meaningful way. And she doesn't disappear the problems of the marginalized communities the way that Sanders does. So she says, she's not afraid of identity politics because they matter to people. Anyway, that's my take. Do with it what you will. Have a nice day.